Before I begin, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everybody for coming here today. It's your generosity that has made this possible. For too long, the idea of a lasting memorial to Republican Socialists has been in the offing. Recognition of the struggle is long overdue. Our sacrifice has been no greater or no less than any other volunteer or activist who dedicated their lives to the just cause of a united Ireland. When discussing this project with friends and comrades, we came to the conclusion that everyone wanted this to be inclusive, and a broad recognition of the struggle, of the socialist struggle in Uri. This incorporates the martyrs, POWs, volunteers, the social activists, and most of all, the families. For without their unwavering support, the struggle would not have lasted a week. In a moment, each of these important facets that made up the movement will be given a voice, and will get to hear at first hand the struggle and hardship endured. Much debating and consideration has been given to the wording and title of our memorial. Some comrades wanted the plaque engraved with the names of our martyrs. Others wanted it in a more public site. But after consultation with the families, it was decided to leave the names out, and that way it incorporated everyone and also minimises any potential pain or anguish that may be felt if something bad was to befall our memorial. In my opinion, if we travelled the length and breadth of the island of Ireland, I don't believe we'd have a more befitting site to unveil the memorial to Irish socialists than here at the Paupers Graveyard. This graveyard is the final resting place for hundreds, possibly thousands of impoverished people who lost their lives during and after the Great Starvation of 1845 to 49. The exact number is unknown. Many Uri people and people from outlying areas had the misfortune of seeing out their days at the nearby workhouse, starving and destitute, exploited by the crime, the greedy, capitalist unionist landowners. This area has also been a hotbed of Irish republicanism from as far back as the War of Independence. 3 volunteers lost their life at the nearby Egyptian Arch by taking part in an ambush against crowd forces. Also at Derrybeg Lane, 2 young men were murdered in their beds by the B Specials in 1921. Many volunteers from this area also took part in Operation Harvest in the 1950s. So it came as no great shock or surprise that the men and women of this area, when faced with an apartheid-like state, rallied in 1972. It is estimated between 60 to 100,000 people gathered at this spot and demanded civil rights for all. Social deprivation and inequality found the resistance. Many socialists took up the fight. Rioting and hijacking morphed into gun battles and bombings. Many young socialists fought running battles with the British Army and RUC along Aylesbury Road. These streets that we live in became our battleground. So it is with this backdrop in history, I am proud that our memorial has been sited here. Thank you very much. I'd like to call... I'd now like to call Eilish Barley and Mixie McDonald, please, for the unveiling of the plaques.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Kate. Well done. And I'm sure you'll all agree that the memorial looks brilliant, and it's a testament to the people who took the time to do this. You know, it didn't happen overnight, but you know, it's definitely a fitting tribute. I've got a few words to say myself. When I was invited to write a narration here today to the men who lost their lives during the conflict, and who we remember today, I was writing with two emotions. One was a undoubted honour of talking about our fallen comrades. The other emotion was the sadness that they're not here with us. Each of the men who died were not just individuals, but valued family members, brothers, uncles, sons. Their loss is still reverberating in many of our lives today. We cannot turn back the clock, but the one thing we can do is honour their memory and their sacrifice. The Republican Socialists have played a long tradition in Uri, yet until now we have not organised a fitting memorial to the part they played in the conflict. The fractured nature of our history has meant that it has been difficult to organise events like we have here today. Sadly, until now, we have allowed others to write the history of militant Republican Socialism in Uri. Our gathering here today is the culmination of the efforts of a group who would like to reclaim the socialist history of Uri. Make no mistake, there is no political point really to sell. We're not looking for any votes or any other kudos. The only driving factor has been to honour and recognise the contribution of Republican socialists throughout our recent history, and especially to remember our fallen comrades. Sadly, I never met Seamus Ruddy. I have spoken to many of his comrades over the years who knew him, and the overwhelming response I got from them that Seamus was a dedicated and respected activist whose contribution to the struggle has not been fully appreciated or articulated. One of the most striking things that I realised about Seamus is that he was far ahead of most of the rest of Irish republicanism in his analysis of the situation in the early 70s. When they say a picture tells 1,000 words, the picture of Seamus outside Uri Sea Station in the early 70s with the placard "Fight for the Workers' Republic" is testament to that. Now looking at this picture many years later, it's evident that Seamus was a very intelligent man, and when others looked at the narrow outside argument that permeated at the time, Seamus knew that the fight for socialism should take precedent. His writings that are still in circulation show a deep knowledge of the history of not just Irish socialism, but of all international issues. His input into the hunger strikes of 1981 is another untold story. We can only guess at the effect this had on Seamus, but he stepped up to the mark and supported his comrades at the forefront of the battle of political status. Watching his comrades slowly die must have been an emotionally draining and harrowing time for Seamus, and hopefully his family get the closure that they deserve and his body is found and repatriated to Ireland. A truly inspirational socialist whose murder was a pointless waste of one of Ireland's finest socialist activists. We proudly remember Seamus Ruddy today. I did have the pleasure of knowing Thomas McGuire, and although Thomas was a little older than me, we were friends growing up in Derrybeg. When Thomas was released from the inbox after serving a sentence for possession of arms, we quickly became good friends. The McGuire family were all good friends and neighbours in Derrybeg, growing up through the height of the struggle in the estate. All our families struggled to get by. Many a lorry came to a fiery end here, believe it or not, on the Campbell Road, and countless petrol bombs were thrown. As here on the Campbell Road, inches from where we are today, during many of the street disturbances, Thomas' first involvement with the struggle undoubtedly started here during the riots that ensued. Bearing this in mind, it's fitting that we gather here at this spot, and the memorial is here. Thomas was only 19 at the time of his murder. His killing robbed his family of a much-loved brother and son. It also took from us a man who had much more to offer the Republican Socialist cause. I know his loss is still very emotional to all who knew him, and I hope our gathering here and the memorial we have unveiled will keep his memory alive with us. A sad loss of such a young man. We proudly remember Thomas McGuire. I have many fond memories of Ian, my brother Ian here. Like Thomas, his initiation into the conflict came here on this road. Ian was a dedicated, committed Republican who from an early age made the decision to take up arms to fight the forces of occupation. He immersed himself in the history of the Irish nation and its many rebellions. He wanted to learn from the past and see how could we avoid the pitfalls of our failed history and finally realise the goals set out in the proclamation of 1916. He joined the IRA and regularly engaged the enemy on many operations. Ian became disillusioned and he left Ireland for a short period. However, he couldn't sit back while the conflict was raging at home. He returned to Uri and continued to struggle with the Republican Socialist movement. Ian was a regular target for the current forces and spent many days in their interrogation centres. But when they couldn't break him, they threatened his life. Sadly, the prophetic statements came through when Ian was murdered a short distance from where we gather here today. We know that Ian's murderers were shielded by the special branch and that British agents were involved in his killing. Ian had a steely resolve and a reputation as an intelligent and efficient organiser. He was feared by the enemies of Republican socialism. Another young man neatly cut down in his pride. We proudly remember Ian Morley today. I can remember way back getting many a haircut myself from Patrick T.Z. McDonald when I was young. While researching this speech, my mum told me that Patrick knew times were tight for us all, and invariably he never charged for the haircuts. And looking around here, I'm sure there was others who also benefit from this generosity. Patrick became involved in this struggle at an early age in Uri. His talent in the salon could have seen him move on to greater things. Much greater things in his chosen profession, but he sacrificed this when he became involved in the conflict. He never shirked from any task he was detailed to, and I've heard many stories of his daring exploits. Patrick moved to Dublin, but still maintained his involvement with the Republican Socialist cause. His dedication to the struggle is another untold story of a committed, Uri socialist Republican. I know Patrick's family are glad that he's remembered here today. We have always included Patrick in our Easter commemorations. He's another comrade who had so much more to offer the Republican Socialist cause. We proudly remember Patrick MacDonald today. Christopher McWilliams, although originally from Belfast, came to make Uri his home. Crip dedicated his all too short life to the Republican Socialist cause. His family also paid a heavy price during the conflict.